LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 26th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's dozen best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. I spent all day Sunday, like I have for the last 317 Sundays, watching those shows and picking out the best clips. If you like the time I've spent on that, the commentary I add, the clips I picked out, you can give me a thumbs up, give me a positive comment. There are other ways to support my channel down in the video description. As usual, I like to start off with some political comedy, but there's no Real Time with Bill Maher or Saturday Night Live this week. I only have one weak joke. Weak, W-E-A-K, weak joke from Representative Hakeem Jeffries that I'll show you in a minute, which is on the general topic of Trump versus Pelosi, which there was a big showdown between President Donald Trump and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, a meeting that was supposed to be about infrastructure that turned out to be about impeachment and whether Trump is engaged in a cover-up and a war of words between the two political figures that included attacks on each other's competency, like mental competence. And then I will also show a few clips on this weird Trump tweet from Japan where he undermines his own national security advisor and sides with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un over former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden. And you'll see Sarah Huckabee Sanders answer that, and a couple other people talk about that, and you'll see coverage from a few of the big five corporate outlets that vary in accuracy and bias, with Fox News, of course, being the most biased. But like I said, I'm going to start off the program with Hakeem Jeffries talking about how Congress can both work on real policy priorities and work on investigating the president. I don't know. This is a really weak joke, and it makes me wonder, did someone actually write this joke for him? And if so, he needs someone to write better jokes for him over in this clip.
If that's the case, then why aren't you ready to start impeachment hearings? You're referring to an attorney general as a so-called, he is the confirmed attorney general. I think he even had a Democrat or two, I think, vote for him, if I'm not mistaken. But if this is the case, then why aren't you for starting impeachment now?
Well, Democrats can sing and dance at the same time, just like Beyonce.
So there you have it, the weak political comedy for this week, the W-E-A-K political comedy for this W-E-E-K. Democrats can both sing and dance like Beyonce. I don't know, is that even a joke? I don't know, it's a hip reference, I guess, maybe. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. And next week, there will be Real Time with Bill Maher back. I actually almost took a clip from Stephen Colbert's The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, his interview with Kamala Harris, where it's even up on the YouTube site under the title Kamala Harris clarifies her position on impeachment, where she really just obfuscates it. She's like, we need to start a discussion of possibly having a committee investigate whether we will have findings over the then beginnings of an inquiry into impeachment. And so it was really a wishy-washy answer. And a couple times she mentions that the Senate won't impeach, which the Senate doesn't impeach, the House does. And you would think a U.S. senator wouldn't make that mistake. But I didn't take that clip for you. Maybe I should have as the political comedy clip. But I do have now 11 additional clips, all news clips, before, of course, the bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end. The first news clip is the news summary from NBC News' Meet the Press. As usual, the longest and best summary of all the things happening, not just the Trump versus Pelosi. Trump then takes off to Japan, the tweet attacking Biden, and oh, by the way, if you want to follow along, this is my notes that I use, my clip list. There's a link down to the clip list in the video description. And you'll see Chuck Todd makes a couple interesting analogies. I don't know if they really hold up completely, but one is that the Democrats' dilemma on impeaching Trump is like their dilemma on whether to vote for the Iraq War, which is, I mean, talk about a corporate news media perspective, and then a comparison of the the two Clinton approaches, the Clinton impeachment approach, the Bill Clinton impeachment approach, and then the Hillary Clinton approach to Trump insults. And anyway, that's sort of the brief summary that are in my clip list here, and I'll talk more about the NBC News Meet the Press news summary with you after we watch it and comment on it together over here.
Good morning, and we hope you're enjoying your Memorial Day weekend. As Democrats debate whether to begin impeachment proceedings against President Trump, they're facing a dilemma. A growing activist base is asking, what are we waiting for? Meanwhile, Democratic leaders warn impeachment could be a fool's errand, resulting in Senate acquittal and allowing the president to argue he's been vindicated in an election year. The last time Democrats faced a similar quandary politically was in 2002. Many chose to vote to authorize a war in Iraq they did not fully believe in because the leaders at the time thought it was good politics in the fall of an election year with a Democratic Senate that was in control by the Democrats but sitting on a knife's edge. And it was until it wasn't, when the war went badly and Democratic voters turned sour on those Iraq war supporters. Today's Democrats face a similar what do we do now situation. Do they ramp up impeachment? President Trump seems to want that, remembering Bill Clinton's 73% Gallup approval rating after he was impeached. Do they fight him on his terms, trading insult for insult? Last time a Democrat tried that, Hillary Clinton wound up calling some of his supporters a basket of deplorables. How'd that work out? Or do they try to do what the president now insists he won't do? Conduct the nation's business. Remember, Democrats won back the House by promising to fix health care in a lot of swing districts. Whatever happened to that? What is clear is that the path ahead for Democrats is not at all clear. Impeaching, fighting, or ignoring all have their political downsides. It's a party divided with a base growing impatient for impeachment and a more cautious leadership saying, not yet.
The only way we're going to beat him is to impeach him. How about that?
President Trump can't stop talking about impeachment.
Whether or not they carry the big I word out, I can't imagine that, but they probably would. The I word. The I word. Can you imagine? I don't speak to Russians about campaigns.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told colleagues this week she thinks Mr. Trump wants to be impeached, even as he denies it.
I think what really got to him was these court cases and the fact that the House Democratic Caucus is not on a path to impeachment, and that's where he wants us to be.
Pelosi, under growing pressure from a vocal minority of her own members to begin impeachment hearings now, is trying to focus on the president's conduct instead.
This president is obstructing justice, and he's engaged in a cover-up, and that could be an impeachable offense.
And she's trying to placate more progressive members who say it's past time to follow through with impeachment.
This is no longer about politics, but this is about upholding the rule of law.
I believe we have no other choice.
Impeachment is a very divisive place to go in our country. And what we can get the facts to the American people through our investigation, it may take us to a place that is unavoidable in terms of impeachment or not. But we're not at that place.
In recent polling, a majority of Americans oppose impeachment hearings.
If we were to call to hold an impeachment inquiry in the hearings in the Judiciary Committee, how would they differ from what we're going to be doing if we don't call an impeachment inquiry? The answer is they wouldn't.
Meanwhile, the president is raising questions about the FBI and CIA's role in the Russia probe, using the word treason and ordering Attorney General Bill Barr to declassify intelligence that led to the investigation.
Who specifically are you accusing of treason?
Well, I think a number of people. If you look at Comey, if you look at McCabe, if you look at probably people higher than that.
On Wednesday, the president walked out of an infrastructure meeting with Democrats, saying there will be no legislating as long as the Democrats are investigating. For both the president and for House Speaker Pelosi, a clash may be politically convenient. Mr. Trump is trying to ensure Democrats share blame for government dysfunction.
Is there anything that you are willing to work with Democrats on now? Because
everything. I'd like to work with everything. No, they have to go down their track. Let them get rid of the nonsense first.
While Pelosi focuses her members on the primary thing uniting Democrats, President Trump.
Another temper tantrum. I wish that his family or his administration or his staff would have an intervention for the good of the country.
And joining me now is the chair of the House Democratic.
And I'll have a clip later, like I said, of Chuck Todd's interview with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, where he talks about the tweet that Trump sent from Japan attacking Joe Biden. That wasn't really covered in that news summary, but will be covered in his questioning of the White House press secretary. But that tweet is covered in the briefer news summary from CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash was substituting in for Jake Tapper, and also concentrated on, you saw the infrastructure week, and Meet the Press had a long, good news summary there about various different topics. One of the most telling clips there, I think, was Jerry Nadler saying, if we call our investigations impeachment investigations, how is that different from the investigations we're doing that we don't call impeachment investigations? And the answer is no difference. They're, none more investigative, or no, just calling it impeachment just gives a talking point to Donald Trump. Maybe, I don't know. I actually have been leaning for impeachment for a long time. I read the Mueller report. I saw all the obstruction of justice, the substantial evidence of at least 3 of the 10 different areas, and significant evidence and need for more investigation in several other areas. So it's not like there aren't grounds for impeachment. Jerry Nadler himself said so in clips I showed some weeks back. So that was an important clip. And then they, I think Meet the Press did a good job of looking at the possible motives and the way that both Pelosi and Trump are gaining from this Trump versus Pelosi infrastructure versus cover-up fight. And you'll see that's covered at the beginning. You'll see the State of the Union this week from Dana Bash on CNN State of the Union. They always start the show saying, what is the State of the Union? And it's wondering if we can survive. Not survive. It's not sure if we can handle another infrastructure week. That's what it is, because that's a big joke around, I guess, the Washington, D.C. pundits that every week is supposedly going to be infrastructure week, and then Trump does something to blow it up, and then this week he totally blew up the negotiations, and that's covered on State of the Union, as well as this Japan tweet that I was talking about earlier over here.
Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is not sure we could handle another infrastructure week. President Trump just kicked off his Memorial Day weekend by attending a sumo wrestling match in Japan on a diplomatic trip that was supposed to be largely ceremonial. That lasted about 15 hours before the president undermined his own national security team and his Japanese hosts by downplaying North Korea's recent short-range missile tests. He tweeted, "North Korea fired off some small weapons which disturbed some of my people and others, but not me. I have confidence that Chairman Kim will keep his promise to me," and also smiled when he called Swamp Man Joe Biden a low IQ individual and worse. "Perhaps that's sending me a signal." Now, there's a lot to unpack there. The tweet appears to contradict his own national security advisor, John Bolton, as well as the Japanese government currently hosting him. Both have said North Korea's missile tests, which landed off Japan's shores, violated UN resolutions. And the president's slap at Joe Biden while on foreign soil capped a stunningly hostile week here in Washington after he walked out of a meeting with leading Democrats and questioned Nancy Pelosi's confidence. Well, joining me to talk about all of this is a member of the Senate Republican leadership who sits on Armed Services and Judiciary Committees, Iowa Senator Joni Ernst. Thank you so much for joining me.
And I didn't have any really good clips of Joni Ernst or really any of the guests from CNN State of the Union this week to show newsmaker clips, but I wanted to supplement that news summary, which I thought was pretty good, and it showed the infamous Japan tweet, smiling when Trump saw that Kim Jong-un had called Biden low IQ, which that all comes from this news story earlier this at the end of last week. Kim Jong-un made a statement through official North Korean news agency that Joe Biden was an imbecile and low IQ. And then the weird part, he said, if Joe Biden thinks he's the most popular presidential candidate, that's enough to make a cat laugh. I don't know. I hope that's some sort of North Korean expression and not some sort of way that the dictator like tortures his pets into cats actually making them laugh on command, or that would be kind of creepy. I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. But I didn't want to leave off that news summary that was so brief that didn't really talk about the move towards impeachment. And I wanted to show this additional 30 seconds, Dana Bash, before a panel discussion doing sort of a roundup. They say it shows Democrats divided, but it pretty much shows almost all the Democrats being for impeachment except for the Nancy Pelosi clip at the end, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch Dana Bash do that roundup of Democrats on impeachment over here.
Investigating me. A lot of differences of opinion within the Democratic caucus in the House about impeachment. Listen to just some of them.
I'm straight with the American people. Donald Trump needs to be impeached.
I believe that an inquiry into impeachment is required at this point in time.
Choosing to not impeach when there's an abundance of evidence could also be construed as politically motivated as well. And we can't be scared of elections.
The House Democratic Caucus is not on a path to impeachment.
Alexander Rojas, what's your sense?
So, yeah, that's the news, the impeachment roundup from CNN State of the Union. That's the last CNN clip I'm going to show. Like I said, no newsmaker clips, but I do have two more news summaries. The next one is from ABC's Martha Raddatz. It's not permanent co-host, or she's not guest hosting. She's like the other, the backup host, permanent backup host or whatever. And also starts off with talking about how the infrastructure week, another attempt at the infrastructure week, which is the big joke around Washington, D.C. that, like I said before, every week is supposed to be infrastructure week till Trump ruins it, and this was another train wreck. And also, I think this clip does a better job emphasizing the way that Trump claimed that he's not going to do anything with the Democrats unless there's a deal, other than, of course, the NBC News Meet the Press clip, which was most exhaustive. And then this news summary goes into the bias that I talk about a lot of weeks, that when a news channel has an exclusive interview, all of a sudden that newsmaker is really important in the news. And you'll see that the fact that Pete Buttigieg is a guest later in the show is part of the whole news summary that I'll talk about a little more after we watch this ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary from Martha Raddatz this morning over here.
This week on this Memorial Day weekend, another attempt at Infrastructure Week turned into a train wreck on Wednesday. President Trump walking out from a planned meeting with congressional Democrats on a bipartisan deal after just 3 minutes, and then appearing before cameras hastily assembled in the Rose Garden to make his position clear. So long as Democrats continued their investigations of his administration, there would be no deal. And with that, the prospect of any further cooperation between the two parties appears dim. Instead, the president opted to slam the Speaker of the House in a manner he had previously resisted, questioning her mental fitness. The Speaker jabbed back, saying she wished for an intervention by the president's family and staff, adding that she was praying for the president and for the country. It's a sobering preview of what the next year and a half may look like ahead of the 2020 elections. And in exactly 1 month, Democrats will assemble for their first debate, making the case for why they should lead their party and attempt to break the stalemate in Washington. On Friday, we traveled to New Hampshire to talk to one of the most surprising contenders vying for the Democratic nomination. Mayor Pete Buttigieg has been outpacing more established candidates in the polls and has raised enough money to appear on the debate stage. He's appeared on the cover of some of the biggest magazines in the country, and he's taking on President Trump directly. I began by asking him what he makes of the dysfunction in Washington.
It's a continuing.
And the last clip I have won't be Pete Buttigieg's answer to that question, but it will be what he thinks about impeachment and how the House should act on impeachment. It's actually only about a 45-second clip. Will be the last clip I'm showing. If you're clip 12, if you're following along on the clip list that I have a link down in the video description. If you want to see the whole ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Martha Raddatz interview with Pete Buttigieg. There's a link down in the video description to all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlet news shows. Some of them you have to wait a week unless you have cable and can tell them your cable provider, I think. But eventually they're all available free. And the last news summary I want to show you, because the Face of the Nation didn't do a news summary, is actually the most biased one. It's the Fox News Sunday one. They cover a lot of the same facts really briefly. The Trump versus Pelosi angle, and the breakdown of the unsettled nature of Washington D.C. before Trump goes off to Japan, and they get to show a lot of video of Trump. As I think of this, like Fox News video was like the news report for Chris Wallace hands it over to John Roberts, not the Supreme Court Chief Justice, but their reporter, who I think if you like turn the sound down and just watch, it's like Trump conducts foreign policy, looks presidential, is what this video is supposed to convey, and it's mostly about his visit to Japan and his foreign policy moves in the last week. And then the most biased part about it is at the very end, you'll see John Roberts comes on camera and talks about that tweet, the one that undermined his national security advisor and his Japanese host by saying that the North Korean missile launch was not a big deal, and then also sided with the North Korean dictator over former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden. You'll see the whole Joe Biden part is completely left out of the news summary at the end, or at the tweet summary at the end of this news summary from John Roberts that comes after Chris Wallace introduces briefly the issues in the Fox News bias spin way that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Hello again on this Memorial Day weekend from Fox News in Washington. President Trump is in Japan today, leaving behind a nation's capital here more unsettled than ever. The president and Speaker Pelosi continue to attack each other, trade talks with China at a standstill. And now Mr. Trump is giving his attorney general authority to declassify intelligence about how the Russia probe started. In a moment, we'll talk with South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. But first, John Roberts traveling with the president in Tokyo.
It was a first for President Trump, the guest of honor at a sumo wrestling championship. The president, long a fan of American wrestling, handing out the 70-pound trophy to the winner. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is eager to show off his friendship with the president, earlier taking him for a round of golf. But most importantly, inviting him tomorrow to be the first international leader to meet Japan's newly enthroned Emperor Naruhito. While pomp and ceremony will take up part of the visit, the prickly issue of trade will also take center stage as President Trump still works to reduce the $58 billion trade deficit with Japan.
The Prime Minister and I talked a lot today about trade and military and various other things. I think we had a very productive day.
The strains over trade aside, the trip is a welcome respite for the president from the investigations and swirling talk about impeachment back home. Add to that new criticism that giving Attorney General William Barr sweeping new power to declassify documents about the origins of the Russia investigation could imperil national security.
I don't care about payback. I think it's very important for our country to find out what happened.
On trade with Japan, President Trump told Fox News earlier today that he will wait until after elections in Japan in July to really push for a new trade deal. And in a tweet, the president appeared to contradict his national security advisor, John Bolton, who said on Saturday that North Korea's firing of missiles into the Sea of Japan was a violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions. President Trump said he's not worried about it and believes that Kim will live up to his commitment, the promise he made to President Trump to eventually denuclearize. Chris?
John Roberts reporting live from Tokyo. John, thanks for that. And joining us now from South Carolina.
And I will have a Lindsey Graham clip in just a few minutes. It's after two other clips. But the one thing I want to point out, like I said before I showed the clip, is John Roberts summarized that Trump tweet from Japan and never even mentioned the part where Trump sided with the North Korean dictator over the former U.S. vice president. And you'll see, excuse me, sneezing on camera. Sorry about that. And you'll see later when I show the Lindsey Graham clip, and the Lindsey Graham clip is Chris Wallace showing an old 1998 Lindsey Graham clip about impeachment and trying to cross-examine him on that. But I don't think that well, as I'll explain when I show that clip. But then I'll keep playing the clip all the way through the part where Chris Wallace actually asks Lindsey Graham about that Trump tweet, shows the whole tweet with like the part that you saw John Roberts just talk about highlighted, and then showing the part where he attacks Biden, but never mentioning it, and it never comes up in the questioning with Lindsey Graham, which is kind of bogus, I think. And it's a little less bogus what they did on Face the Nation, not very much less bogus. You'll see in a long interview with Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, the Republican senator from Wisconsin, Margaret Brennan at the very end asks him about the Trump tweet. To CBS Face the Nation's credit, I don't know if this is because they taped the interview really early and Trump hadn't fixed his typo, or if they're just trying to be true to the original text or whatever, but they show here the text of the tweet where Trump actually misspelled the word Biden, which not a good move when you're accusing someone of being low IQ to misspell their name, I guess, especially Biden, which not the toughest name to spell. It's only, five letters? But you'll see Margaret Brennan ask Ron Johnson of Wisconsin about it, and he gives sort of a brief version of the same answer you're going to see from Lindsey Graham in a minute, and also from Sarah Huckabee Sanders in the clip before that, which is the next clip after Ron Johnson. The big Republican talking point is, Trump is being successful in North Korea, which isn't really true either. But it's not really an answer to the attack on Joe Biden, the siding with, the undermining of his national security advisor and his Japanese host, which you saw that Chris Wallace and John Roberts didn't even mention he was undermining his Japanese host, just John Bolton and his mustache, I guess. But here's the Ron Johnson from Wisconsin clip from CBS's Face the Nation that I think I've overanalyzed before showing, and then I'll, I guess, still talk about a little more with you after we watch it together over here.
Quickly, I want to ask you about the president's tweet here. He's in Japan, and he, talking about war, said that Kim Jong-un's testing of these short-range missiles doesn't bother him, even though his national security advisor said it violates UN resolutions. It alienates the allies like Japan, who could be hit by some of these short-range missiles. And then he praised Kim for insulting Joe Biden. Is this appropriate?
Well, certainly North Korea is one of the real problems that we're having to deal with. And it certainly concerns me when they're doing any kind of testing. The fact that they haven't been testing, nuclear devices or longer-range missiles is a good thing. This is a very difficult issue. Administrations on both sides of the political spectrum have tried to deal with this. President Trump trying to deal with it in a somewhat unorthodox style. I hope he succeeds.
All right. Senator Johnson, thank you for joining us. We want to turn now to Montana Senator.
Then they had Montana Senator John Tester. Don't have a clip of that, but as usual, all of the Face the Nation clips are linked down in the video description to the Face the Nation YouTube channel, where they're split up into parts, but you can actually watch all the clips of Face the Nation for free on the YouTube channel. And like I said, Margaret Brennan in Face the Nation at least showed the whole tweet there and asked Ron Johnson of Wisconsin about it, but there was no real follow-up, no cross-examination, and that is not true of how Chuck Todd handled the White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who kept trying to change the subject, kind of like Ron Johnson did there. And for a while, Chuck Todd brought it back to the actual topic of siding with the North Korean dictator rather than the former Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden. But you'll see by the end of this, that Chuck Todd eventually gets distracted into the topic of whether Trump's North Korea policy is actually successful, which isn't the tweet topic that he starts with in the clip that I will talk about with you. I think this is the clip from the Sunday morning shows this morning that got the most play in the social media and the other, like the sites that analyze the Sunday morning news analysis shows before I get to do my show. So yeah, this is Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying, no, it's fine for Trump to side with the North Korean dictator over the former vice president. And I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that 3-minute and 9-second clip together over here.
Well, you referred to his Twitter feed. I do want to put it up. He did downplay it. North Korea fired off some small weapons, which disturbed some of my people and others, but not me. I have confidence that Chairman Kim will keep his promise to me. And then also smiled when he called Swamp Man Joe Biden a low IQ individual and worse. Perhaps that's sending me a signal. Can you explain why Americans should not be concerned that the President of the United States is essentially siding with a murderous authoritarian dictator over a former vice president in the United States?
Chuck, the president's not siding with that, but I think they agree in their assessment of former Vice President Joe Biden. Again, the president's focus in this process is the relationship he has and making sure we continue on the path towards denuclearization. That's what he wants to see, and that's certainly what the people in this region want to see, and are hopeful that the president is right and that that relationship will be what helps move us further down that path.
The President of the United States takes the North Korean dictator's word about Joe Biden. What happened to speaking with one voice in American foreign policy? Is the president not setting up, trying to have world leaders sort of pick which political party they should side with? I don't understand what message the president is sending here.
The president doesn't need somebody else to give him an assessment of Joe Biden. He's given his own assessment a number of times. I think you've seen it. I'm sure you've covered it on your program. The president watched him and his administration with President Obama fail for 8 years. He's come in 2.5. He's cleaned up a lot of the messes that were left behind. We shouldn't even be in the position that we're in to have to deal with North Korea at the level we are if they had done their job in the first place. And that we're seeing in moment after moment and relationship after relationship that the previous administration did nothing. They failed with Iran. They failed with North Korea. They failed on trade. And we finally have a president that's being tough with these countries. We've put tougher sanctions on North Korea than the Obama administration ever did. But at the same time, the president wants to develop that relationship, and he wants to actually get something done. He doesn't want to just talk in pretty rhetoric. He's been tough on China for the very first time ever. China is sitting down at the table and negotiating for better deals on trade. For the very first time, we're seeing Iran's economy crumbling. Nobody's been tougher on Russia than this president. I think if anybody needs help with an assessment, it's Joe Biden, and whether or not he should be trying to get an upgrade when he failed to do the job in the number 2 slot.
I'm trying to understand how your North Korea policy is a success if he's still launching missiles. I mean, I understand that you guys have had summits, but nothing's come of it. If anything, he's now doing missile tests again. So we're right back where we began.
It's not true to say nothing's come of it. There have been steps that have moved us towards.
So I kept playing that there a little long just to show you how Chuck Todd kind of got distracted. Like I said before, I showed the clip into the, I mean, maybe you think the lack of success of Trump's North Korea policy is actually he got distracted into the more important issue than what Trump tweeted about Joe Biden. But it is kind of jarring for longtime political junkies like me who've covered presidential politics. And I can remember when there used to be this like politics stops at the country's shore. You know, you don't go overseas or outside the country and attack other, you know, we have United Front. And like Chuck Todd, I think that was a good follow-up question to begin with before he got distracted about how Trump seems to be like going around to foreign capitals and trying to get the foreign capitals to help him in attacking his political enemies. And that's just, That's bizarre. That's a breaking of a norm, which reminds me of that video I'm hoping to make before the end of the year, one of a few videos I've been working on for a while, including turning the Supreme Court up to 11, but then yelling norm on Cheers is a social norm, explaining what social norms are, because that's what, if you watch the show Cheers, yelling norm on Cheers is a social norm, because there's no law that says you have to do it. You might be shamed by the group if you don't do it. Maybe, maybe not, but like everybody knows they're supposed to do it, and so they just do it. That's a social norm. And so anyway, I've been thinking of making that video, but that's another norm broken by this president trying to get foreign leaders to attack his political opponents. And that's the end of my clips that raise that topic, although this next clip, if you watch as I play it all the way to the end, you'll see this, because I set this up when I showed the Fox News news summary, that they talked about the first part of the Trump tweet from Japan, undermining Trump's own national security advisor as to whether the North Korean missile launch was something to be feared, or whether it violated UN resolutions, as his national security advisor said. And Trump said, "Oh, I'm not worried about them." Well, you'll see that part is highlighted in the tweet when Chris Wallace asks Lindsey Graham about it at the very end of this clip, and they totally ignore the part attacking Biden. But this is actually Chris Wallace cross-examining Lindsey Graham about what he said on December 18th, 1998 about impeachment. And I saw Glenn Greenwald retweeting I think it was the Hill tweet about this Chris Wallace cross-examination, saying it was a great cross-examination and shows how Chris Wallace is like a real journalist at Fox News. And I've shown a lot of clips over the years of Chris Wallace being pretty biased, actually. And this is not the greatest cross-examination. I mean, they show one clip of Lindsey Graham saying that the president not obeying a subpoena is a reason for impeachment. I actually went and read the whole thing Lindsey Graham said, and none of it really lines up with what Lindsey Graham answers, and there's no follow-up from Chris Wallace. That's the other benefit of me playing this clip all the way to the follow-up where he talks about the Trump tweet from Japan, a totally different subject. So this is not great cross-examination from Chris Wallace, although I guess they did show this one clip from December 18th, 1998, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that Chris Wallace questioning of Lindsey Graham over here.
All of what's going on here in Washington, a political circus, but you took a different view back when you were leading the impeachment effort against Bill Clinton back in the late 90s. At that time, you said that any president, and you talked specifically about Clinton and Richard Nixon, who defied Congress when it came to subpoenas, was in danger of impeachment. Here you are back then.
You're becoming the judge and jury. It is not your job to tell us what we need. It is your job to comply with the things we need to provide oversight over you.
Question: why is it an impeachable offense for Clinton or Nixon back then to ignore congressional subpoenas, but it's okay for President Trump to do now?
Well, there's two things here. The Mueller investigation was a special counsel appointed to find out if the president committed a crime, if he colluded with the Russians, if he obstructed justice. The president gave him 1.4 million documents to Mueller. Everybody around the president was allowed to testify. He never claimed executive privilege. He complied, no cover-up, worked with Mueller. Mueller's the final word on this for me. So if Clinton had stiff Ken Starr, that's different. What Nadler's doing is trying to destroy the president and his family. If I were the president, I'd fight back against this political revenge coming out of the House. Mueller was the man of the law. Mueller was an independent voice that we all trusted to be fair. I don't trust House Democrats to be fair. They're trying to redo the Mueller report. They're trying to make up other stuff. And at the end of the day, it will be political suicide for them to impeach. If I were the president, I would fight Nadler tooth and nail. I'm glad he cooperated with Mueller. That's the difference.
As we have reported, the president today, I don't know, maybe it was today, maybe it was yesterday. These time differences with Japan confuse me. The president tweeted this, and I want to put it up on the screen. North Korea fired off some small weapons, which disturbed some of my people and others, but not me. I have confidence that Chairman Kim will keep his promise to me. Do you share the president's confidence in Kim, and how do you...
You notice the part where he attacked Joe Biden and agreed with the North Korean dictator's attack on Joe Biden. That part, not highlighted, not mentioned, never came up. Somehow that doesn't exist in the Fox News universe, although I guess they did actually show it, even though it wasn't highlighted in yellow. But if you put that together with the Fox News news summary I showed earlier, where it was like completely omitted, it shows you how Fox News is in a lot of ways Trump TV. And I didn't think that Chris Wallace did that great a job of cross-examining Lindsey Graham about what he said back on December 18th, 1998. I went back in the congressional record. I found the whole speech from Lindsey Graham, and he's mostly talking about how Bill Clinton lied to the grand jury and lied. I think it said that the Congress sent Clinton written questions, and he thought that he lied in the questions. There were like 88 questions. I hope it wasn't like 88 questions about 44 women, or I don't know. That's an old song title that maybe no one knows what I'm talking about. But the 88 lines about 44 women. Anyone out there? Hello. But if you read the whole thing, it totally belies what Lindsey Graham was saying to Chris Wallace about how Trump totally cooperated. Well, he never even testified to anybody. He answered some written questions and over 30 times said, I don't know, I don't recall, or some version of that. So he was actually attacking Clinton for not, and that whole thing about, well, he wasn't complying with Ken Starr. That would have been something different, and he's totally cooperated. It was like, it's all like bogus talking points, and Chris Wallace did nothing to follow up on that or cross-examine him, and not even really the substance of what he said back on December 18th, 1998, if you check into it. And if you're watching this as a recorded show, I'll put a link down in the video description to the page from the congressional record. It's a really long page, but then if you can do a search on the page with your browser, search for Graham, which is only a couple, because it's like all the statements from all the members of Congress who wanted to talk about the impeachment of William Jefferson Clinton back in December 1998. I'll put that link down in the video description for the recorded show. But Chris Wallace did not do that great a job of cross-examining Lindsey Graham on that. And then you saw at the end how they showed the tweet, but never talked about the part where he agreed with the North Korean dictator over the vice president. So there's one more Fox News clip I want to show you, and I've been reading the live comments along the way and seeing all the super chat contributions, especially people giving contributions in honor of other people in the live comment section, which I appreciate all the super chat contributions. And I see a couple there from Nelson 100, and I was reading the live comments earlier where Nelson 100 was saying that there's no collusion in the Mueller report. There's obstruction but no collusion, and that's not actually true, and that's important for this next clip. I wanted to mention that there actually is a ton of collusion in the Mueller report. There's no conspiracy to commit the crime of hacking, which or of no conspiracy with the Russians for what they did, or collaboration. If you read the Mueller report, he says collusion isn't a legal term, and we never really investigated collusion. We're looking for a conspiracy to commit a crime. But there's plenty of collusion, because that's sort of a vague term that means like working together, especially working with WikiLeaks to disseminate the material that Russia hacked. if you saw, Julian Assange was indicted this week for violating the Espionage Act for helping disseminate hacked materials, which is exactly what, if you read the Mueller report, Donald Trump Jr. did that, Roger Stone did that, Jerome Corsi did that, but they're all protected by the First Amendment. It's hard to tell because it's mostly redacted. That whole section is redacted in the Mueller report, but that is collusion. If you read the Mueller report, there are all these contacts, which Eric Swalwell is going to say to Chris Wallace in this next clip, but I don't think Eric Swalwell does a great job of talking about what, collusion is not a legal term, and he says there should be a crime of collusion, but anyway, I will talk about all of that a little more after we watch Chris Wallace make the claim that there's no collusion in the Mueller report despite all the stuff I just said, and Eric Swalwell's rebuttal, not that great. Here's Chris Wallace doing a better job, I guess, of cross-examining a Democrat than he did with Lindsey Graham in the last clip, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that together over here.
I want to pick up on exactly that because you were one of the Democrats leading the charge for years that the president, his team, colluded with the Russians in the election of 2016. Here you are just days before the Mueller report was handed over to the Attorney General.
Do you believe the president himself colluded with the Russians?
Yes. So the president knew the Russians were seeking to help him. And so he went out as a candidate, invited them to hack more.
You believe there's direct evidence that the president colluded?
His invitation for them to hack more, that's direct evidence of inviting them to collude.
But Congressman, the special counsel directly contradicts you. Volume 1, page 5 of the report, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Congressman, the Mueller report spent 22 months, looked at all the evidence, says you were wrong.
It did not say that, Chris. Actually, it laid out 200 pages of contacts between the campaigns, and because a prior Congress had a failure of imagination to specifically articulate a crime of collusion doesn't mean a future Congress shouldn't say we don't want this to happen. I respect the special counsel's finding that the laws we have today, and with the limitations of not being able to look at finances, he could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt conspiracy. I don't accept that this is what we want a president or a candidate to do. And so I've written legislation to put an onus on any campaign, family member, or candidate, if they have this type of outreach, they have to tell the FBI.
Let's take a look at the one case you gave there on that MSNBC interview. You said, well, the president called for more hacking. I mean, seriously, I remember that vividly. I think most Americans do. It was in July after the hacking of the DNC, and the president, or then Donald Trump, holds a news conference and says, well, if the Russians want to find those 30,000 emails that Hillary Clinton deleted, I'm sure the media will be interested in that. You can't possibly think that is collusion.
Well, Chris, what did the Russians do next? The Mueller report lays out that they undertook more hacking within hours of that, and this is just a month after the president's son.
You think that was an order from Donald Trump? You don't think the Russians were already,
with the Russians,
probably already doing it?
I don't believe in coincidences with the Russians. And your last guest, he used to not believe in coincidences with the Russians until he got too close to Donald Trump.
If Mr. Trump colluded with the...
So there, like I said, Eric Swalwell, he mentioned the hundreds of pages of contacts between the Trump administration and Russians as his support for his own claims before the Mueller report that there was evidence of collusion, and the Russia, are you listening speech from Trump, can you find Hillary's deleted emails, and then how the Russian hacking actually occurred right after that. But when Chris Wallace was incredulous that, I also remember back when Trump originally said that I thought it was kind of a joke, but I didn't have the full context that you read in the Mueller report. I didn't know about the Trump Tower meeting where, and the George Stephanopoulos revelations that started the whole investigation that Russia had dirt on Hillary. that the Trump campaign knew about that before any of us knew about it. I didn't know about it way back when, Trump didn't know about it as strongly. I mean, there were some indications at that point, but I think Chris Wallace was being disingenuous in that questioning of Eric Swalwell that, that couldn't have been collaboration or collusion, because I remember back then I didn't think it was. But now, knowing everything we know about all the contacts, it actually seems somewhat more nefarious, to me at least, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And I have a couple more clips here on this topic. The next one, I think, is a much more emphatic, defense of impeachment. From this is again from NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd is talking to Rashida Talaib, one of the new young stars of the House of Representatives, who has been a strong proponent of impeachment. You'll see Chuck Todd says one of the loudest voices, and you'll see she defends that position here, but also talks about some of the other important oversight, talks about kids in cages and big pharma, and I think this is a really good answer from Rashida Talaib that I want to talk about a little more with you after we watch this penultimate news clip before the final Pete Buttigieg clip together over here.
You are easily, I think, one of the louder voices when it comes to impeachment. I'm curious of your reaction to Congressman Jeffries in this respect. Do you believe that leadership is being methodical, or do you believe that leadership is trying to buy enough time where they say, we're too close to the presidential election, in order to take it off the table quietly?
Well, I can tell you, as one of the newest members of Congress, the traditional congressional oversight process isn't working. From subpoenas and trying to figure out what's going on with children being caged at the border, still waiting for a response from this administration, from even my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, when we're asking for big pharma to come before our oversight committee to testify about high cost of insulin, and they're telling them you don't have to come before the committee. A lot of the corruption that you see through the Oval Office is already seeping into the to the halls of Congress. I can tell you from day one, this president has misled Congress, has undermined his own cabinet members, and has lied to the American people. I have to tell you, this is a pretty remarkable time in our country. And if you saw, the largest class, incoming class before our class, was the Watergate class. And at that time, even though many people say that we didn't campaign on this, look at the fact that the majority of states across this country saw a huge historic turnout of people coming out to vote for the first time. And I feel like in many ways that's a referendum to stand up to a bully, to a president that subverts the United States Constitution every single day.
I want to play for you a quote from an interview I had earlier this week from
And like I said, I think that was a strong defense of impeachment and oversight, and a critique of Trump administration policies from Rashida Talaib. I can't disagree with any of that. And then, before I showed the final clip, I want to thank my Super Chat contributors so far. I talked about that a little earlier, especially the Super Chat contributions and from some people in the live chat to other people in the live chat. Here you go. So I appreciate all of that. You have a few more minutes if you want to contribute through Super Chat. And then also if you contribute through PayPal at the link down in the video description at the $5 level, or become a Patreon subscriber, a patron at the $5 level at a link down in the video description, I will send you this weatherproof vinyl hashtag LiberalViewer sticker. At the $10 level, you get the sticker and this ACLU Constitution. Has the whole Constitution in it, plus a Know Your Rights with the Police section in the back. That's $10 level on both PayPal or Patreon. I sent out a couple of those this week, including one to the Netherlands, of all places. If you give a PayPal contribution at the $10 level, and give me a shipping address, or that's why I sent those out. I got a shipping address and the requisite contribution pretty much anywhere in the world. I can send those out at those levels. And then the final clip I promised you before the bonus Dash and Sandy clip is Pete Buttigieg talking about impeachment. This is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Martha Raddatz talked to him and talked about he says he thinks that Trump is worthy of impeachment, but he doesn't say the House should start impeachment inquiry or an impeachment inquiry or impeach him, or just says, there's kind of a dodge, it's up to the House. And I don't think, one of the things I don't like about Pete Buttigieg, I think he is a good speaker, he's inspirational, he's a good communicator, but there's not a lot of substance in a lot of his answers, and I think there's more dodge than substance in, you'll see this 45-second brief answer about impeachment over here.
The current president.
You said this week that while the president deserves to be impeached, you leave the decision about launching those proceedings up to the House. But House Democrats aren't unanimous on this issue. So who should make that decision? The leadership, Nancy Pelosi, or the more vocal wing of the party?
Well, what's interesting is the case for impeachment is being made most emphatically by the president himself, because it seems like every day or two there is another affront to the rule of law. I'm just trying to be respectful of the fact that the best thing I can do to get us a new president is to win the nomination and defeat the president who's there. I think Democrats are underestimating, despite his unpopularity, we're underestimating the chance that he could win.
I want to move to foreign policy.
So, I don't know. Was that kind of a weak answer from Pete Buttigieg? Sorry, I was trying to find the bonus Dash and Sandy clip I'm about to show you, but that's why I was a little slow on coming back from that clip. But I think that wasn't the greatest answer on impeachment. As someone who wants to be president of the United States, just saying I want to beat the current president, he should talk about how obstruction of justice, all the obstruction of justice that is documented in the Mueller report, sullies the office which he is seeking. There should be more there and more substance. I mean, he's a good communicator. He's like hitting issues, I guess, important to voters in Iowa and New Hampshire. Not so much in South Carolina. People of color not so much drawn to Pete Buttigieg, I guess, but he's one of the rising stars. I think he's going to be a force in the primaries. I'm not saying I'm totally opposed to him. I just wish he would put forth more substance, which is one of the things that I've said in the last couple of weeks makes me like Elizabeth Warren more and more, is because of how she has a plan for many, many things. Even though I don't agree with all of them, I appreciate the detail and the substance that I'm not seeing from Pete Buttigieg. And anyway, before I finish the show, like I said, that was the last news clip. I promised a bonus Dash and Sandy clip. Last week I showed how Sandy pushed Dash out of the way to get to the water. Well, here you'll see Dash pretty much ignore some molestation from Sandy to get to the water and then drink the water. This is all Sandy's water bowl. I don't know why Dash's favorite place, Dash the cat, his favorite place to drink is from Sandy the dog's water bowl. I don't know why that is, but it's documented in the 20-second clip that I will end the show with over here. And that's the show. I hope you appreciated the work I put in this Sunday and every Sunday for the last 318 Sundays. I appreciate my live viewers and your comments and criticisms of the clips I'm showing along the way. I appreciate the recorded show viewers. Give me a thumbs up. subscribe to my channel, give me supportive comments, and then there are ways to support the channel since there's not much in the way of YouTube ad revenue for the last year or so. So there are links for that down in the video description. I hope you appreciate the work I do. I appreciate all the support and commentary that you add as well. And until next week, or until I have some reason to, or some ability to upload one of those edited, produced videos I was talking about earlier that are coming sometime in 2019, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.